All good? So, yeah, a few minutes, a few seconds.
I'll just say before we get started, if people want to use the chat function to indicate if they would like to come in for a comment or question. So obviously people can like raise their hand or gesture and I'll try and get everybody. But otherwise it does make it straightforward if people can indicate through the chat if they would like to make a point.
Cool, yeah.
Okay, it's past, let's get started. Thank you everybody for joining us. This is the first all-party parliamentary group meeting via video conference that I have ever chaired. And I think it's the first all-party parliamentary group for the Liverpool City Region meeting that we've had over video conference. I hope people agree that it's the right thing to do to, as much as we possibly can, attempt to keep going with the functions that we would normally carry out as a group of members of Parliament. Thank you to Devo Connect, who are the Secretariat for our Merseyside group. We really appreciate that. But obviously, given the current context, we might have been talking about more longer term issues, perhaps. But there's some really crucial issues in the city region at the moment, not least what is going on in the care sector generally. And so I thought it was very important that we make sure that we have an overview of what is actually happening for members of staff in the care sector and just discuss different possible things that we could do in the city region to make an impact. So without further ado, really, I'll hand over to Lynn Morris, who will give us an overview, particularly from a Unison perspective, but of the sector. Then we've got Lauren, who's going to talk from the perspective of the front line. We've also got Liam Robinson, just give us a public transport update, because that's obviously been a key issue as well. And after that, we'll have Oscar's dad, Jay McKenna, to just run through anything else urgent that we need to pick up. I think what I would suggest is if perhaps if we have Lynn and Lauren first, and then we'll have any questions or discussion. I know people will have a lot to say, particularly from the members of Parliament. I know all of us have been on the phone to care homes a lot. So let's start there. And Lynn.
Thanks very much, Alison, and welcome everyone. I just want to start by saying that at the start of this COVID crisis, Unison North West launched a major survey across the region, and the returns, over 2,700 care workers completed the survey and sent it back to us, and it was covering over 1,000 care settings, including residential homes, care homes, and learning disabilities. You'll have all received a copy, I would have thought by now, of a report that analysed those findings from Kent University, so you will have seen some of the detail in it. But it did find that 2/3 of the care workers said that their employer was not doing enough to keep them or the people they cared for safe. That 66% of the care workers surveyed said they were concerned about a lack of PPE, and 78% said they were concerned about infecting the people that they actually cared for. In the Liverpool City region specifically, we had examples of staff being told not to wear masks because it may scare some of the dementia residents. There were numerous examples of staff who had to buy their own equipment. Even when they were coming into contact with COVID-19 cases, we had examples of poor PPE, low supplies leading to multiple use, which is clearly contrary to Public Health England advice. So the picture across the Liverpool City region was not great for a long period. Our survey also found that 8 out of 10 workers said they'd not be paid the full wages if they became ill or needed to shield, self-isolate because of COVID-19. Instead, they would get statutory sick pay, which, as you know, is £95 a week and completely inadequate to support them and their families. So as a result of that, workers said, although they realised they shouldn't, they would be going into work and not only putting themselves, their families, but also service users at risk. The findings of our report were really quite shocking, and some of the comments that were written were heartbreaking, really. But I think you have to put them in the context of this privatised and outsourced social care sector. Unison North West, as you know, Alison, particularly yourself, has been involved for well over 5 years, and we've been heavily involved with the campaign for Care Workers for Change campaign. So the reality of the fragmented workforce and the privatised social care sector in terms of conditions and service has been to systematically undermine the workers' terms and conditions and their pay and maximise the profits for the care home. We've seen increasing casualisation of work, a rise in zero-hour contracts, and a depression of wages that have meant many carers receive less than the minimum wage. They're not paid for travel time, and they receive an absolute pittance for sleep-ins rather. Most carers don't receive occupational sick pay, and even before the crisis, we were routinely and regularly forced to attend work when they were ill, putting not only themselves at risk, but the most vulnerable they care for at risk at the same time. Proper sick pay, we believe, isn't just a moral case. It guarantees the health of workers and service users and ensures that people receive the care that they should be getting. The privatised model of social care has demonstrated time and time again it's unable and unwilling to deliver on basic care. So, you know, I would have to say our campaign is very straightforward. We launched the campaign for Care Workers versus COVID-19 after the survey came through, and we've got 4 main demands. Protect our care workers' health with priority testing and essential training in personal protective equipment for the frontline staff. Make sure they've got that equipment. Protect our carers' pay. So full normal pay for those who are required by government guidance to self-isolate or have become ill because of COVID-19, including the staff on 0 hours contract and bank relief. We've also asked, third one is to protect our carers' employment, to ensure no one's dismissed or laid off for staying at home for themselves or their families due to COVID-19, and that COVID-19 is excluded from any of the management triggers of sickness absence, most of which are very draconian in this sector, and to protect the carers' families, carers on full pay, workers who have dependents or cannot get into work because of childcare problems, and the fact that childcare isn't available to them should be protected. So I'm pleased to report that we've had a really good response from Merseyside so far, although there's much work still to do. The councils are coming on board, and you know they are trying to push the providers to make those commitments and deliver that package to our workers. But it is slow, and there's more that needs to be done. I'm pleased to say that the issues around the distribution of PPE seem to be improving in Merseyside, although I understand in some homes the stocks remain low. They're there at the moment. New testing facilities are being brought online, but there's still a significant challenge for the care workers who don't have access by cars. Sefton and Halton Council have both formally signed our agreement, which is great. Liverpool City Council has agreed £6.2 million financial resilience package to social care that includes a commitment around guaranteeing full normal pay for care workers that are ill, shielding or self-isolating due to COVID, which is excellent. And Knowsley have done a similarly agreed a package of £1.4 million. and Wirral have agreed to pay the foundation living wage to all carers. So that's really good. In terms of what we're looking for regionally, we're calling on all Merseyside local authorities to sign up to the campaign. We're calling on Merseyside local authorities to make explicit the commitment of the social care providers that they will actually pay the money they get to the front line. Unfortunately, we've had several experiences where we've seen some providers happy to pocket the extra money, but not ensuring that it gets to the workers who really need it. So that has to be done, we believe, by, with a clear direction, by enforcement, and if necessary by sanctions. We want to seek to extend the agreement to non-commissioned social care in localities, and you'll hear more about this when Lauren speaks, because she has a particular interesting story, if not depressing one. And finally, we want to make improvements to permanent moves towards insourcing social care, where we believe it's fundamental, because the weaknesses of the system have been so badly exposed by this crisis. It's what we've all known has been happening, but it really has brought it into sharp focus. And nationally, we're calling on MPs to lobby the government and the Department of Health and Social Care to fully fund normal pay for all care workers that are ill, self-isolating or shielding because of COVID-19. And after the crisis is over, we want you to continue to fight to get this vital service brought back in-house under public control and release it from the vagaries of the market. So I don't think there's any more I can add to this at the moment. You're probably best listening to Lauren and her story. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Over to you, Lauren.
Hiya. So my name's Lauren Douglas. I work for a senior care company called Home Instead. I do community care. So I go into people's homes every day. We can go into up to 15 different clients each day. The company is a privately owned franchise of a large American firm. They are not commissioned or funded in any way by the local council. The majority of our clients are private pay, where they are above the threshold, so they can't receive any supplements towards their care package. We are all employed on a 0-hour contract. We can go to work, obviously some weeks and have 30, 40, 50 hours, next week so we can have 3 or 4. Since this COVID-19 has come about, I personally have had a massive reduction in hours. I've gone from a full-time job to 6 hours a week because the families have removed them from the care package, or some of them have passed away. We've had family shielding. I approached my employer and said, I can't survive on 6 hours a week. What do you want me to do with this? I begged for more hours, was left. I begged for furlough. I was rejected 4 times for being furloughed. He said no, because if others go off sick, you'll need to cover for them. Again, there was no protection for me there. I was just left with me 6 hours. When we are not well or we need to take time off, we're only getting statutory sick pay as well. Now, I know personally that my mum actually works for our firm, and she's received a shielding letter from the NHS. She is not shielding because she can't afford to take the time off work and earn £90 a week, £95 a week. So she is still working every single day. We've got no PPE whatsoever. I mean, literally nothing. We were given a 35ml bottle of hand sanitizer and told to make it last for the foreseeable. We get 1 box of gloves at the moment and told to make them last. I mean, we can go into a client and use 2 pairs of gloves. We can use 30 pairs of gloves. It depends on the client. You can't make them last. You can't use them again, and you need to change them. The aprons have run out. We were told not to wear masks because they were unnecessary. We were sent a video telling us how we don't need masks, we shouldn't be wearing them. Now, of course, they're telling us you will only need a mask in the event that your client has a confirmed case of COVID. How do we know that? How do they know that? They're not being tested. Of course, we all know the symptoms are not showing straight away as well. They can be carrying these things. We could be going to one and then transmitting that to 15 other clients in that day, who then have their families coming and things. It's all over the place. The company itself are what I can only say, the cowboys. You're begging for support. I've gone to a local, I don't know if you're familiar, there's a charity or a group, LLT PPE. I know some people are involved in that. I've actually managed to get them to give us some face shields and got them and give them out myself to the other staff. I've been on forums on Facebook getting masks made and donations of gloves to give out to the other girls and my mum to protect us. When I'd mentioned about unions and things, I was told to shut my mouth and I'd be out the door if I tried to get people to join a union. I've seen a massive reduction in the hours after that conversation. Any sort of backlash you give or any question of anything, they strangle your wages and cut your pay. We are still being told to take clients out. We do companionship care. We are being told to take the clients out in our personal vehicles to get shopping. So, we're not following any social distancing guidelines. The clients should be in shielding. But the reason for that is because they charge more when you're taking them out of the houses. So it's all to do with the revenue still coming in. We are not getting any sort of support with any of with time off and things as well. I've had a conversation with them about the schools being closed. I've got 2 young children, and I said to them, you're not giving me the hours, you won't furlough me, I've got the kids at home, they're not in school. He told me, put them in a hub, the school hubs are open, why can't they go there? Not that I should be forced to do that, but my eldest is 12, so he can't go because he's in secondary school. He told me, well, leave him at home on his own, he'll be fine. Anything that they can do, they will, and they will get away with, and it's become a real problem. And of course, we're slipping through the net. It's great that the councils are committing the money and the support, to the council fund or council commission services, but us in the private sector have slipped right through. We're not getting this funding if we're off. We can't shield. If we show symptoms, I can tell you there must be 5 or 6 that I know personally that have had coughs, but they just can't stay off because they just can't afford it. We've all got bills to pay. I appreciate everyone's in the same situation, but we've been totally missed with this thing. The council services are great, and it's great that everybody's getting that support, but in the private sector, there's no accountability whatsoever. They're being allowed to treat us and the clients however they want, just to keep their bottom line growing, and it's all about money. And us and the clients have become the problem. We're the victims in this now. So I'd like to see that support branched out and to encompass the private sector as well, with some sort of even guidance, because CQC at the moment, I've reported whistleblowing things to CQC and to Careline. They go back again to the director of the company. He gives his side of the story and it's brushed under the carpet. There's no accountability at all in the private sector.
Okay, Lauren, that is brilliant. Thank you so much for giving us your view. I think you make a really, really excellent point about the accountability and funding mechanism that we can use through our local authorities actually doesn't solve the whole problem. And that is a really, really important point. And I know you speak for a huge amount of workers in our city region who work in the care sector who have experienced similar things to you. So thank you so much for contributing and for explaining to us exactly what it's like and what you've been dealing with. Care workers are some of the most highly skilled, brilliant people I've ever worked alongside. So thank you for everything that you've done. I want to, if we can, just bring some colleagues in. I know we've got lots of different people on the call: parliamentarians, councillors, and other professionals. So if people can just pop their names in the chat there, I'll bring people in. Paula Barker. Can you just unmute yourself, Paula?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I was on the call with Lauren last week, I think it was, Lauren, and the stories are utterly heartbreaking and horrifying all at the same time. And I think it's just, I just wanted to raise a point, particularly for parliamentary colleagues on the call, that my private members bill is about closing the loopholes in the national minimum wage with specific emphasis on travel time. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about sleep-in payments because it's still with the courts, so we're prevented from doing so. But I am working with Unison North West and also Unison nationally on this private members bill. It was supposed to be the end of June, but obviously with the crisis it's been moved back, so the new date is the 11th of September. So any support from parliamentary colleagues is most welcome on that. Just on the issue of insourcing, I mean, this has been a particular soapbox of mine for many years, and when I was in Halton we were insourcing care homes, fortunately. So I've been speaking to Steve Mumby, who I can see is on the call. Hello, Steve. And we had a really good session with Steve and Nick Small last week. I think Kim was on the call as well, about looking about how we can insource in Liverpool. And I know that that may not be sort of in line with every elected member's view in Liverpool, but hopefully by the end of everything we do, we'll be able to convince them that it's definitely the way forward, because profits should not be getting made off the back of the most vulnerable people in our society and those incredible care workers who are providing those services, who go above and beyond every single day. And one of the things I've mentioned to Liz Kendall is about, obviously, the national strategy and also ensuring that care work is treated as a profession, because I think one of the colleagues, I don't know whether it was you, Ian, had made the point the other day about the lowest paid. It's not about the lowest, well, obviously it is about low pay, but it's all, they get classed as low skilled. People who provide care work are not low skilled. They are absolutely incredible. Some of the work they do just blows your mind. So I think we've got to also change the narrative around that as well, and we've got to ensure that there's decent training and opportunities and you know, progression for them, and we've got to start treating it as a profession. Cheers.
Kim.
Thanks, Ali. Just wanted to clarify issue regarding testing, because I know that they opened up the testing centre in Hunter Street, I think it was last week, and we were told that all care agencies and residential homes would be informed that testing would be available, but it was incumbent on employers to book their employees into the testing centre, but there'd also be opportunities for mobile testers to go out. So that was one question. And the other one was around the issues that Laura raised about complaints. You know, what I would do instead of going to Careline is to go directly to the commissioners, so that the commissioners get to find out what's happening with the services that they're commissioned to deliver in our city, because it tends to go to Careline, and as you say, they'll contact the provider and nothing is ever done. So I think issues need to be raised directly, either with Martin Farron, the director, or with the commissioners. And I take point of what Lynn was saying before about the money coming from local authorities to the care providers, but not going to the care workers, sitting in the pockets of the private providers. Because as we all know, there are a lot of providers in the city that have, you know, significant profits that they're sitting on, particularly the likes of HC1 and other organisations like that. So in terms of what Paula was saying, yeah, it is imperative that we look at insourcing so that our public services are delivered by the public sector. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Kim. Ian, then Steve Mumby. Wrong button, I think, Ian.
Don't know what happened there. I do apologise. Zoom. I spoke to Lauren a couple of times. Great to speak to her and obviously get an overview of what she's actually experienced. So we did write to the company, asking them for the sit down and just informing them that we fully support the Unison campaign. Just to see if we got any response from them, Lauren, you know, with regards after the horror stories that you told us, which you just outlined so eloquently on this, and just for everyone obviously watching. I know Andy Burnham's called for it in the last couple of weeks, and I know Alison and Steve, people who've been parliamentarians since 2010, it's always been in the manifesto, hasn't it, National Care Service. And I think this is going to be the big ask once we come to the COVID crisis, that, you know, we look at the reformation of the care service, and that National Care Service for me is absolutely paramount. And as a party, that's got to be one of our big asks, is bringing that under the umbrella, I mean, they're comparable with the NHS. So I think that's what we need to do moving forward to end the horror stories which Lauren's outlined, and all the trade unionists here who've worked and organised within them sectors have actually seen that day to day. So the work that they're doing is beyond reproach. It's so important, and as Paula said, and as we outlined on Monday, you know, there'll have to be a rethinking and rebalancing society's views on the jobs, and, you know, how people are viewed and what jobs they actually take and what they actually bring to society. And hopefully that will be, moving forward out of COVID, there will be an understanding in people's minds about the importance of the jobs Lauren does, and they should be respected and obviously financially recompensed correctly. So thanks for your update, Lauren. It was magnificent. Thanks, Ali.
Thanks, Ian. Steve? Mumby, sorry.
Hi. Yeah, I completely agree with the comments that Lynn made and Lauren and other comments. I've been chairing a scrutiny panel with councillors and also reps from Unison, the GMB, since the autumn, looking at insourcing adult social care. One of the things about the coronavirus crisis in care is it's sort of like looking at a slow motion crash replayed in front of your eyes, because we've had evidence from care workers before this started about the awful situations confronting, whether it was in residential care or domiciliary care, appalling hours, the lack of respect for people. And we know that there's a kind of, this has been in crisis for years, actually. It's a real case of market failure, and I completely agree with Lynn and others about the importance of insourcing. But 2 or 3 points that we've kind of identified that are possibilities. Firstly, I think if we're going to be giving more money to care providers, we've got to put conditions on that extra funding. And I think there are 4 points. One is about pay. The second is about hours. I mean, lots of workers don't even, aren't getting proper notice of the hours they're going to work, particularly obviously if they're on 0 hours contract. The second is travel costs and travel time, payment for. And the fourth one, which is particularly relevant, I think, to the city region, is the issue of training and skills. I think the point, I'm not sure if it's Kim or Paula made, about revaluing the workforce. These are not unskilled workers. And I think we need to maybe think about trying to create new kind of qualifications and training. Again, the evidence we got from care workers was that in the public sector, you got excellent training. In the private sector, you got very poor training. I think the second set of issues around the longer term are around insourcing. The problems you've got here are twofold, and I'm completely an advocate of it. But one is the cost. I think that's actually the lesser problem. The bigger difficulty is you've got a fragmented market, not just in terms of the providers, but in terms of the customers. So Lauren talked about in domiciliary care and residential care, you've got some people are private customers, some are commission services. So actually, you almost have to create companies. It's not a matter of sort of taking over companies. So I think we need to think about structures. We have had some interesting offers. I'll just finish on this that might be helpful for the city region. We've been talking to the Foundational Economy Group, who've been working with the Welsh Government on pilots on adult social care. And they've actually offered to do the same for the city region for free. So if you're interested, Steve, there's a free offer from a group of people who've been working on pilots on different sorts of care, looking at also licensing which I think could be a route towards it. But I think the other issue we need to look at, and the Welsh Government has floated this, is the issue of funding, because you can't talk about structures without funding. The Welsh Government have asked for to be able to increase income tax. It's a power they have, which we don't have in the city region. But now is the time, I think, for us to be asking as local government, whether at council or city regional level, for new tax raising powers to fund adult social care. It's a tricky one. But one of the reasons I think it might be a smart move, we need more money, we all know that, councils are about to go broke, but also in a weird sort of way, if I can put it like this, Boris knows he's got a problem, he'd quite like to land it on our toes, and we need to think about that one, because a local government offer to take on the tax raising powers gets central government off the hook, a hook they'd rather not be on, but they can't refuse. So I think it's something to think about, but calling for tax raising powers locally for adult social care, a dedicated tax, is something we should think about. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. I'll bring Neil McGonigal in, and then Steve Rotherham. Did you want to just say a bit from the point of view of the city region and your team? I know this is something that you've been really thinking about as well. And then if anybody else who wants to come in on care could just indicate through the chat, and I'll bring you in after that, and then we can move on to Liam's update. I mean, I'll sum up in a second. I know that we'll want to do a lot more on this and keep going. So we do need to decide what we need to do. But yeah, Neil and then Steve.
Thanks, Alison. My name's Neil from Uber. I just wanted to start off, huge respect to Lauren. I think it's an incredible job you guys do anyway, but particularly in the current circumstances. Steve touched on transport there, and I just wanted to quickly mention something we're doing in transport space, just in case it's of interest and potential value to anyone on the call who's either in the kind of social care sector or has contacts in that space. So we've been speaking to the NHS for a few weeks now about just what role we can do as a company, given what we do, kind of transport and moving people around to kind of assist in the current situation. That culminated in something you might not have seen that was launched on Wednesday this week, Uber Medics, which is basically service we've set up in tandem with the NHS, specifically for moving health workers around. We ensure the drivers have all got full PPE in terms of masks, gloves, hand sanitizers, etc. But we also run that at a 25% discount. So it's basically, we just waive the kind of service fee that Uber would normally take from trips, and the balance that's paid is kind of what goes straight to the driver. Per the conversation that we've just had the last half an hour, we get that it's not just about the NHS, and there's a lot of people that work in the kind of care sector outside of the NHS. So that is also available to kind of anyone, whether it's in healthcare, community healthcare, residential social care, community social care. So if there's anyone, Lauren or anyone else that's kind of involved in the care sector, might not be of interest, but if it is of interest and value to anyone, please don't hesitate to get in touch. The guys at Devo Connect, etc. I've got my contact details. So if anyone is interested or wants to know more about it, please do get in touch.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Coming through loud and clear, mate.
IT. Can't stand it. Honestly, God. Right. Okay, so I've only caught some of this, to tell you the truth. I've been on a call with the lovely Boris Johnson about a whole host of issues, including some of this with the M9, and we've been very much pushing him to respond to, for instance, yesterday's announcements, which has an impact on this issue, which is around local government finance settlements. Again, short-changing areas like ours, and areas that are probably the areas most in need, well, not probably, demonstrably, because we've got the evidence, most in need, and yet the promised funding, whatever it takes, don't forget, that's not coming through, and it looks likely that, for instance, areas like Knowsley are going to be massively impacted, which has a direct consequence to care. Now, care already has had a 28% cut since 2010. And if you have a look at its makeup, 58% of those people in care are paid less than the real living wage. Hopefully some people have seen some of the social media we've been putting out. There's £500 million worth of unpaid care that's provided every year. The workers from female and BAME backgrounds are much more disproportionately hit than others. In the Liverpool City region, we need 8,000 more carers by 2035 because of our ageing population. So there's a whole host and a whole panoply of different factors that are all conspiring now, which will provide the perfect or the imperfect storm for what we're going to face. And so, what do we need to do? Because that's the big question always, isn't it? Well, we've launched this thing myself. I think Steve Mumby mentioned, or somebody mentioned Andy Burnham before. Andy and myself have launched something called Build Back Better. And it really is a genuine opportunity for us to build a better society, to start to look at some of those things where previously we, people on this call, might well have recognised the fact that as a country we were undervaluing cleaners and care workers, but the government certainly hadn't, and they hadn't responded to that. So the first thing we need to do, if we build back better, is to give those people at the bottom of the socio-economic ladder a bit of a boost. So they need not just a clap on a Thursday or a phony medal from the government, but they need a pay rise. That will help, because that will equalise. If everybody starts to get that pay rise, the things that Steve Mumby was talking about, which are difficult for certain councils because they would have to bump up a large proportion of carers, they would be mitigated by the fact that everybody would be on a real living wage. And that's one of the things that we really need to be doing. And of course, the economy that we construct in the future hopefully will be predicated on the resources and the powers that we get from central government. So again, with that conversation with Mr. Johnson just before, I've been pushing for us to be given the resources, because we're going to get the powers to lead the economic recovery in the M9 area, the metro areas. So yeah, I think the work that's been going on is just demonstrating how important this is and how big an issue it will become. And we hopefully will be able to do things differently in the Liverpool City region. Thanks, Al.
Thanks, Steve. I've got Paul Cummins as well, just come in briefly.
Thanks. I mean, adult social care has been an afterthought for this government, and it's paid the price by the deaths of hundreds of people across the city region. PPE coming too late for a lot of them, and the testing regime, although we've got to keep pushing those. I was just going to say that I completely agreed with the analysis by Unison and the comments made supporting taking back social care. This needs to be done at a national level. We meet together across the city region, portfolio holders for health and social care, and we're all Labour. We're all very much, pretty much in agreement as to the way forward and working together, but we're tinkering at the edges. We need radical change at a national level, and the powers to be able to do things at a local level to bring about proper, decent social care for the future.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's a really helpful point, both from Steve and from Paul, and from Steve Mumby as well, that in our city region, we're quite clear about, despite the challenges and whatever, we're quite clear that we want structural reform. And I think Paula mentioned, you know, a national strategy that we need to have, as well as your private members' bill, but a broader national strategy about and making sure that we've got really good levels of pay but also progression from those decent levels of pay up through to management levels. So it's seen as what care is, which is a proper profession. Obviously, Lynn, Morris, I'll give you the last word on this subject, unless anyone else wants to. But Lynn, you mentioned Unison's campaign, which we've got representation here from members of Parliament, cabinet members, leading cabinet members, Steve as our Metro Mayor, and it sounds like we've had quite good take up and feedback in terms of Unison's campaign, which is obviously a good thing, but that we need to be pushing more nationally to get whatever, obviously a terrible time at the moment, and we need to focus on the immediate issues of PPE and some of the things that Lauren mentioned in terms of bad practice, which obviously we'll all work with Unison on. But what's next in terms of pushing forward to get a national campaign for the sector, and just anything else that you want to say to sum up, and any instructions you would have for us?
Okay, I mean, I think one thing I do want to say is thanks for all the comments. They've been really positive, and I think everybody gets the problem. Everybody understands the problem. It's as you say, how we move forward. And I think, the likes of Steve, likes of trade unions, and the whole host of other people are talking about how do we get better. We're not going back to the way it was. It's going to be something different. And I think, but for us in care, the really something different is it should be on the same footing as the NHS. It should be protected, it should be public, it should be looked after. We have got to start thinking about care in the same way as we think about the NHS. So one thing I will be pushing for from all of the MPs and councillors is that we start to have that common voice. This can't go on, and we've seen how the fragmentation and the breakup of social care has just got worse and worse and worse, and it really has come into sharp focus when you see people going into work when they shouldn't be in work because they're ill, because they can't afford to stay off, putting the lives of themselves and others in danger. When you see them going into care for people without the proper equipment, you don't get worse than that, and that can't continue. And even after the crisis, we do have to make sure that we get the government listening to how they do this nationally, in terms, as I say, on the same footing as the National Health Service. So, obviously we'll be coming back to you. We've been doing a lot of work with, as I say, the report we sent out was work that was done that we work with Kent University. Lydia Hayes there has done a lot of work on social care over the years, and her team, funded by the Wellcome Trust, did the research for us, and they're coming out with a lot more ways forward of how we might look at care differently in the future, and I hope to bring those to you at some point in the future.
So simple message: care on the same footing as the NHS.
Yeah.
Right. Well, speaking only for myself, that'll do for me. So we'll have a brief update from Liam and then from Jay, if that is okay. Steve Barwick is saying that the Secretariat will be happy to draft a letter to CLG and DHSC secretaries for officers of the APPG to sign off. Yes, we'll pick that up after the meeting, Steve. Thank you. Liam.
Good afternoon, everyone, and May Day greetings to you all. Thanks ever so much for the invite to come and give you an update on developments on the public transport network. I know I emailed round a briefing note in advance of the meeting, so I'm not going to labour all those detailed points, but I'll do a quick canter through the current state of play, the way that we're looking at how we may start to develop things if some of the restrictions of the lockdown get reduced. And then actually touch on a few sector-specific points and a number of kind of asks, if you like, of our parliamentary cohort to keep lobbying on our behalf and with us to achieve some positive benefits. I think the first sort of thing to say is that currently on the transport network, it's a very, very unique time, and I say that extremely diplomatically. Passenger numbers are down by about 85%. Now, actually, genuinely, that's very good, because that shows that the vast majority of the travelling public are listening to all of the government's messages and making sure that they're only travelling for those vital journeys that they need to make. Also, it's a big thanks to all those frontline workers, you know, the bus drivers, the train crew, the station staff, those kind of key parts of the frontline that are keeping those people that need to make those essential journeys moving around are doing a fantastic job in extremely difficult circumstances. There have been a number of changes in the short term on the transport network. A number of services, the frequencies have had to reduce, and quite frankly that's because a number of frontline workers are having to self-isolate, with train crew and bus drivers, some of which having to self-isolate. That does limit the number of services both on the rail and bus network that can be put out there. But we are pleased that we've been able to kind of continue a full geographic coverage across the network. No areas without a bus or a train service that normally would have one, although the frequency of services has reduced. So for example, Merseyrail are running between 7 in the morning, 7 at night. The bus network is running the vast majority of routes. Very few routes are not running, but frequencies have reduced quite a bit. So on a lot of key corridors where it would have been a bus every 5 minutes, it's more like every 20 minutes. And Northern Rail have also got an emergency timetable in place. There's always things that we want to do to assist, but I think one of the things we're actually quite proud of is, as a region, we believe we've done as much as any other part of the country to support essential journeys. We're the only region that's actually giving free public transport to NHS workers. We've allowed concessionary travel holders to travel before 9:30 to get to those specific hours that are reserved for them at supermarkets. For the buses that we subsidise for school children of key workers, we've made those buses free for those kids. And obviously we've also suspended tunnel tolls as well. So as a package, we think we're doing as much as any other part of the country. We would always like to do more. We know we need to do more, but there's a lot we've been doing in the current circumstances. What we're currently working through is a number of scenarios, and I think it's important to say these are scenarios at this stage, as to if the lockdown is eased, how potentially the transport network can scale up. From our perspective, the overriding priority is health and safety of the workforce and the travelling public. So one of the key things we're focusing on is the requirement of social distancing, and particularly relevant kind of important aspects with regard to PPE. All of those things do present logistical challenges. It's right that we wrestle with those, but it's important that I point those out. We actually think by respecting social distancing of 2 metres, we probably could only have the ability to transport about 25% of previous patronage. To give an example, a 3-carriage Merseyrail train that can take about 200 people, that basically with social distancing could probably only take 50 people. So I'm just pointing that out now just to sort of demonstrate how the kind of logistical challenges will be in place. I think one of the things we're proud of is, as a region, we're one of the areas that's very much focusing on that. I've been told by some of our officers that the DFT is not requesting other train companies actually kind of work up plans for social distancing. I know some are, in fairness, but not all of them are, whereas we have definitively requested that Merseyrail do. Equally, one of the things we're very conscious of is this is going to have a huge impact on the future of travel when we get back to whatever a new normal would be. But we are very much focused on Steve's agenda of building back better. So we're very conscious about how we can embed cycling and walking and that sustainable agenda, which has been one of the few positives of this crisis. But also as well, how do we make sure that people are confident to get back on public transport and don't just go back to the private car where those people have that ability? There is a big perception issue where if you get in a car, you'll be in your own sealed environment, whereas if you're in a shared space, understandably, people have perception and other concerns about kind of what that might mean. So that's very much taking up a lot of our thought about how we can build that back better. I'll just touch on a few final sector-specific points that I think are really important to flag up to our parliamentary cohort. Firstly, on buses. About a month ago, the government put in place an industry bailout to cover the bus industry that will run for the next 3 months. I'm not going to mince my words here. I don't think it was a particularly good deal for the taxpayer. It effectively covers bus company losses and requires us to keep making the same subsidised payments we were doing before. From our perspective, we are very conscious that it's quite likely that there will be a requirement for further public purse support for the bus industry after that initial 3-month period. Our strong ask, along with other metro mayoral areas, is any kind of bailout fund should be devolved to the city region to decide. It shouldn't be paid directly to the bus companies, but also it should be based on reform. Again, I'm not going to mince my words here. Bus companies have done very well in the good times. We can't then see a situation where the public purse picks up the slack in the bad time and it goes back to business as usual. It really does need to be linked to devolved buses powers and reform of the sector as we build back better in the future. A rail point I'll just touch on that I think is really important for our parliamentary cohort to understand and lobby with us on is that the government changed the contractual arrangements for the vast majority of train companies at the start of the crisis and effectively underwrote the revenue and the fare box risk for most other train companies. Because Merseyrail is not is a devolved rail network to the city region, along with a number of other devolved railways, Scotland, Wales and a few other places, and a number of tram networks, we were left out of that package. We are arguing very strongly that we should have a bespoke deal, because whilst there isn't a short-term risk to the continuation of services, in the long term, if we don't get suitable, similar financial support, that could present a financial risk that could come back to the city region. On the cycling and walking agenda, there's a number of things we're looking to do to sort of embed that positive change. In the short term, that's actually working with our district colleagues on some reallocation of road space, particularly around social distancing, so people can ride bikes and walk around with sort of greater space at a time when there's less traffic on the road particularly. Also looking at things like cycle pop-ups for key workers, so they can use that as a means of getting around. And in the longer term, by that we mean beyond the next 6 months for the next couple of years, really looking how we can bring forward and accelerate our plans for that 600-kilometre segregated network that's a key part of Steve's manifesto commitments. Final points that I'm going to make is just around the finances, just to give a bit of a kind of an indication of how much this is costing. Just for the combined authority on transport alone, we believe that this is costing us 5 million additionally a month, and that's before you factor in some of the other kind of costs in terms of loss of fare box revenue for train and bus operations. We know we will need an emergency transport budget out the other end of this, and just like the rest of the local government and public sector family, there is no clarity whatsoever from the government in terms of what financial package is going to be made available. And that is vital that we get something suitable to cover all of that. And I'll finish finally on these points is the key asks that we're looking for from you as our parliamentary cohort to keep lobbying with us on. One is that very key financial package, particularly around Merseyrail, but also the local bus network, and particularly linked to devolved powers and reform of those sectors. That's something we think's vital that we need to achieve. But then also some funding around how we can embed sustainable travelling, walking and cycling, sort of looking at how we can change some of the kind of usage of the road network particularly. And the final point is to actually design the services that will be needed throughout the rest of the crisis and beyond. We actually need more access to data, particularly anonymised mobile phone data, so we can actually get to the bottom of exactly where people need to go from A to B, so we can make sure the transport network fits that accordingly. So I hope that was useful as a bit of a canter through where we're up to and where things might be going in the future.
Thanks, Liam. Public transport is one of those things that when you're dealing with some of the challenges of COVID-19, it doesn't feel like an immediate thing, but actually having listened to you speak, it feels like it's going to become an immediate challenge quite soon. So definitely get our heads around it. Jay, just any further comments or issues or things that you think colleagues need to be aware of at this point?
Just, I think lots of what's been said around care as the current issues and even transport. I think, you know, we're about to really go through this cycle again as we talk about going back to work, that these problems people are facing in care homes or other key workers right across the economy that they've been facing, they're about to see that as we talk about reopening. We're going to have those PPE issues. We're going to be talking about how you socially distance. We're going to be talking about those good employers that do and don't do this. So I think that, you know, there's some notes I've made and I'll circulate this because I'm conscious of time, and, you know, Lauren and Lynn's contributions were certainly the most important to hear for people here. But I think there really is a need for unions to be in the room on this. We've seen the value of that through what Unison are doing on care workers, and the TUC nationally has been calling for a National Recovery Council. I know Steve and Andy are talking about Build Back Better, and we've been speaking to them about that and union involvement. I think we're really keen, and Liverpool City Region, I think, is well placed to do some of this, given the fantastic politicians we've got and the structures we have to do some of this, but making sure as well that what happens in Liverpool City Region isn't just us saying we've done some really good stuff, but making sure we share that with other Northwest colleagues, and you know, we lift everybody up to the kind of standards we'd expect, because there are real fears that in certainly our neighbouring counties that there will be significant challenge for some places more so than we might face. But I think unions have a really useful opportunity to do some good stuff. The TUC has been heavily involved with government, as you will all know. Michael Gove and Rishi Sunak mentioning the TUC at press conferences in Downing Street is a rarity, but one we will welcome at the minute. We're going to be calling for a lot more stuff around jobs guarantee. So, you know, similar to the Future Jobs Fund that we'd had, we're going to be calling for that next week, saying that there needs to be something to secure people in work, because we know there's going to be an economic shock. Lots of stuff we've said this week about a safe return to work, because one of the fears we have is people will be expected to go back, but can they be sure it's safe? And if we don't have those kind of economic interventions, like more flexible furloughing schemes, people will face more of that stuff that Lauren's said there, that you know, if we don't have good sick pay that's paid at, you know, the rate of the job rather than the national sick pay scheme we have, people will go back to work even when they might be unwell. And will anyone go back into the wider economy, into bars and shops, if they're not sure that these people have had the opportunity to isolate on full pay or to be furloughed and that they shouldn't be there? I don't think we will. I know I would be looking at people who I thought maybe looked unwell. I'm thinking, is this employer doing the right thing? I wouldn't be using employers. So if I don't have that confidence as a customer, certainly employees won't. Yeah, I think there'll be lots for us to do to try and reimagine, and you know, again, mentioning that role of unions, and I know Steve and Andy are mentioning this in employment charter stuff in the region, is unions in workplaces is really key to try and help shape this. So on the safe return to work stuff, we're saying HSE or union health and safety reps should be signing off risk assessments with employers to make sure we can get people back into work. You know, you could only imagine how much better a situation we would be in if we'd have had that prior to this crisis, to make sure there was things like PPE, never mind the government's plan. And we know unions in workplaces have those plans for crises like this, and the employers that are coming through this are those that are working well with their unions. And you know, just to mention this, in the Northwest and certainly Merseyside, we have trade unions in workplaces already. Around a third of employees in the Liverpool City Region are members of a union. Unions are present in over half of all workplaces in Liverpool City Region, and pays collective bargaining affects around a third of people's pay in Liverpool City Region. So this shouldn't come, and maybe it's a chance for us in Liverpool City Region to do something on this. This shouldn't come as a surprise that unions can have an important role to play. So I think maybe one of the things we can try, and I know Steve and Lynn from the Combined Authority will look at this, how we can, you know, use those structures maybe to do some of this well, whether that be on the important things we've mentioned around care and transport, but very practically making sure that as the economy reopens, that it is safe. Because I think, you know, my personal fear I have at the moment is we're about to start this cycle again, and you know, our employers who maybe quickly shut down but are now thinking they need to reopen for economic reasons, able to actually, you know, be ready for what's going to come around PPE, social distancing, the money that might be needed, job retention scheme being extended. You know, there's many questions unanswered as we enter the next phase, as have maybe been answered in the phase we're in at the moment.
Thanks, Jay. I just want to bring Kim in briefly. She had a question for Liam. Kim?
Sorry, and I did send some questions to the Secretariat before the meeting as well, but it was just around the Citibank scheme that we have in Liverpool. Liam, I know that staff are going to be made redundant and the scheme will be closing, so wanted to know whether LCR would be in a position to support something similar going forward in terms of linking it into the walking and cycling initiative.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I'll be completely honest, I don't know exactly where the City Bike scheme is up to within the annals of the council, but I know it certainly was being looked at in terms of its future. Yes, we are kind of working particularly with the City Council on what the future it could be, but actually we'd like to do something that could also fan out onto a more regional footprint. We think kind of what would work better is not just something that covers the City Council area, but also other parts of the region which lend themselves quite well to cycling, places like from everywhere from Kirby town centre through to the kind of Sefton and Wirral coasts. We think if we're going to build it back better, it's those kind of places we've got to sort of put those things in place. I am genuinely sort of discussing it with Laura Robinson Collins, though, to look at what we could do, particularly around the City Bike scheme, and then see where we can take it from there. And happy to keep you posted on how that might develop as well.
Thanks. We will finish at 1:30. The colleagues have been mentioning they have to go. That's great. We will finish at 1:30. I'll just mention two things very quickly before we finish. Hopefully, if people haven't had the opportunity to ask the specific point that they needed, I know that everybody will be able to connect outside this meeting, so please do shout if you need contact details. The other thing is, from a Northwest perspective, Jay is busy talking to unions right across all of our sectors about how we can hear from all different unions, just to follow up some of the points that he made about what happens next in terms of the return to work. And finally, from the point of view of the APPG, we will organise a future meeting to talk about the Build Back Better, to talk about the next stages and reconstruction, for want of a better word. So that is really where we'll go from here. On care, Lynn, I expect that you will continue to feed us through that information that you've got and to keep that pressure on, and we'll be working with you. We'll all be working with Unison to make sure that we keep that going. But I feel sure that we do have a shared understanding of what the broad direction is that we want to go in, and it's just about trying to work out what levers that we can pull to make that happen. Other than that, I'll just at this point say thank you to everybody. This has been a really, really helpful update. Thank you, Lauren and Lynn, particularly for giving us an in-depth insight into care. And we'll all be working together to try and get some movement and some improvements on that subject, because it is an absolutely crucial issue. It's about a year ago since Lynn and Paula and I and others were all stood outside St George's Hall campaigning on the care sector, and we were saying then that reform and better pay and terms and conditions for care workers was absolutely urgent at that point. So we have known none of this is a surprise, but hopefully now care work is absolutely, even from the Tory government, getting the recognition that it deserves. The question is, how can we use that momentum and push forward and get more done? But otherwise, thank you to everybody for joining us, and just watch out in your inbox. There'll be more of this soon. Thank you.